Greetings, all. It's Dr. Bankhead here at the Struggle Inn. It's my first live here on YouTube, so I'm not quite sure what to expect. And I apologize because the picture appears to be rather grainy to me, and it may seem grainy to you as well. And again, this is my first time, so I'm on a learning curve yet again. But I'm up to the challenge. Yes, indeed. I'm up to the challenge. I have to figure out how to turn my head so it looks forward. So, if you've watched any of my videos, you will note that one of the subjects that I've been covering is self love and self care and explaining how to get there and demonstrate that you're loving yourself to yourself. Also, one of the other topics that I've covered pertains to the systems of the world. Hi, Kayanda. Thank you for joining me this evening. Uh, yes. So I talk about self love, I talk about self care. And self care entails not just physical care, but spiritual care, psychological care, emotional care, balance, balance of feelings and logic or thinking, critical thinking. We require balance, going with the flow. Uh, when they say go with the flow, flow usually, when you think of flow, you think of water. Water flows, but water, the substance that flows, we can relate to it being in several forms. That's the form where it's flowing, but it's also the form where it's hard, like ice. And then there's the vapor. So water can take more than one form. And when you're going with the flow, sometimes you will have to say, manage or recognize your boundaries. And that's sort of like ice. Yeah, your boundaries. You don't want anyone to cross them. And ice is pretty much a barrier. And then you have vapor. And the vapor, you could kind of relate that to the spirit. This spirit is often referred to as a vapor or as a wind, a mighty wind. And so, as a result, we should be operating in this realm, going with the flow, being able to put up and maintain a boundary, and being spiritually connected. We are all energetically connected. And there is such a thing as a divine universal consciousness and divine universal energies. And basically, if you're open and receptive to spiritual guidance and direction, you're less likely to be in error. And I say that because, for the most part, we're operating from our minds. And our minds have been programmed. We generally, I believe, lack the appreciation of the fact that the human being is essentially a walking computer. The brain processes information, and it creates what they call synapses, which are connections of the different information. And the brain operates as an information highway. And it's been programmed. You were programmed before birth, about 6 months before birth, because you were able to hear what the people outside were saying, and you could pick up on your mother's emotional feelings, emotional settings, so to say. And all of that became part of your makeup as well. So generally, it's understood that if someone, thank you, Kayonda, I appreciate your comments. Um, if the mother has a certain emotional setting during her gestational period, the child is likely to be in that sort of frame of mind um, when they're born. So if the mother was 8 months, let's just say, give her 1 month freedom, but if the mother was 8 months angry, then the child that she is bearing and will give birth to will likely be inclined to anger. And if she's extremely um, shy, I'll say, or inclined to be hermiting, not very outgoing, the child may have a temperament that would incline it to be more introspective. Um, in any event, when I talk about self love, many of us have had these experiences. Like I said, our brains have been programmed and we've been influenced by the people in our environment, whether that's your parents, your teachers, the older people in your communities. You learn by watching what they're doing and imitating what they're doing. And for the 18, I'll say 18 formative years, the years that they're considering you not to be an adult, you have learned from the people in your environment, and many of the things that they said to you have imprinted on your mind, and you remember them, and you operate from what you have been exposed to. So the challenge it becomes after you've reached adulthood for you to think for yourself, be responsible for yourself, make choices that are supportive of yourself. However, there are a number of young people, excuse me, that do not experience positive reinforcement in their family home for a number of reasons. I guess primarily the reason today's society would be parents are just stressed out. They're stressed out. They're going to work average, I guess you'd say, 9 to 5. And many of them, let's just say, they're doing it to support themselves and their families. And the notion that they should actually enjoy what they're doing, love what they're doing, look forward to doing what they're doing at work, many of them are simply there to get that paycheck because they are good economic slaves. Yes. It is a wage slave system. You know, when they talk about an employment contract, it's really not a contract for entertainment purposes only. Yes. A contract is identified as being a meeting of the minds, put quite simply. However, when you go in for an interview and subsequently get hired and sign the employment contract, the only meeting of the mind is that the employer tells you what you're going to do and you agree that you're going to do that. And one of the things they have you agree, I'd say at least 90% of the time, if not 99.9% of the time, they have you agree to doing other duties as assigned, which actually makes you a wage slave. And when I say people with jobs are wage slaves, I'm also including the people who are salaried employees. Now, mind you, it sounds great to have a salary. You know, every year you know you're going to make $200,000. That's great. You don't have to worry about if you're going to have to get more or if something's going to happen and you're going to get less. You're going to make that 200,000 regardless of what you do. That's the notion, that's the idea, that's the sales pitch. But the reality is, pick one of those: legal, medical, educational, pick any one of them. Uh, Even a sole proprietor, say, of a store. And they're definitely going to be on some form of a salary. But say you're the associate, so you get to lock and unlock the business. Well, you're a salaried employee. And if they call you at 2 o'clock in the morning, baby, you're going to have to get up and go handle some business. You might have been in a deep sleep. You're going to have to get up and go handle some business. And if you have to do that 7 days a week, besides working however many hours you do during the day. I know many salaried employees didn't come in at 9 and they didn't leave at 5. They might have come in at 10 and left at 12. And that's just fine because they're going to get their salary regardless of how many hours they put in. However, I know those very same people would often come in on a Friday evening and they didn't leave the office until Sunday evening to go home because they were working the entire weekend, aside from maybe a lunch or so. So the fact of the matter is, if you take the number of hours that the salaried employee is working and or has had to answer on calls and divide that by the number of hours they worked, they could actually be making less than the typical wage slave. But it sounds great to have a salary job, and usually the titles sound fantastic. So who wouldn't want to be in that position? I tell you who wouldn't want to be in that position. Someone that knows who they are, someone who appreciates who they are, someone who recognizes their own talents, their skills, their abilities, someone who knows what they like and who they like, someone who is responsible for their actions and chooses to stand up to their responsibilities. These are the people. Yes. And there's nothing to stop you from being that same kind of person. Yes. And that comes with showing your self-love through your self-care. And here's what I mean by that. Many people will say, "Oh, I love myself," but they hate their hair. They're not a big fan of their skin color. In fact, they're going to wear a mask. It's usually called makeup. And people who might have been perceived to be unattractive, with a little touch here, and a little touch here, and a little touch here. I saw a video today. I thought it was quite funny. A grandmother and granddaughter. And the grandmother had a bowl of lemons and some lemon juice. And she was pouring the lemon juice on the lemons. And her granddaughter, 12-ish, probably 12, yeah, not quite teenager, almost there. Her granddaughter says to her, "Gram, what are you doing?" And Gram says, "I'm putting lemon on lemon." And the teenager said, "Well, that's dumb." And the grandmother said, "Oh, well, you put fingernails on top of fingernails, and you put eyelashes on top of eyelashes. And I'm going to add, you put wigs on top of your hair." You said, "What now?" I thought that was the funniest thing. Because from someone's perspective, it might seem dumb, but for other people's perspective, it helps them make it through the day. Because maybe they have alopecia and they have no hair, so they wear a wig. Or maybe because of some trauma they experienced as a child, they feel uncomfortable exposing their real hair to the world. People have different reasons for doing the things they do. You can have 10 people doing the exact same thing, but their reasons probably are different. You see, there are over 7 billion of us here on the planet, and each one of us is unique. So that's 7 billion possibilities. Even though they tell you it's a polarity and it's one way or the other. If there's 50 shades of gray, there's 150 million shades of gray. There's 7 billion shades of gray, and the numbers are going up every day. Yes. So, at one point in my life, I claimed being a Christian. I've chosen to step away from all labels. First, I find the labels to be quite divisive. And I think the divisiveness is an impediment to the unity that will be required for us to make positive and productive changes in the way people interact in our society. That's going to require unity, not divisiveness. Okay, well, this is my first live here. Kayonda, I really appreciate you being here with me this evening. I appreciate all your comments. And I look forward to maybe seeing you again in another one of my lives. And I invite you to check out some of my videos on my channel, The Struggle Ends with Dr. Bankhead, Thinking Out Loud. And I thank you so, so much for being with me this evening. And I'm going to try to schedule the next live so you can be here with many more people besides you and me. Thank you, Kayonda. Let me put this down here. Oops. Oops. I'm still typing, trying to get these letters out.